When you see this clip, you see why I call him cross-eyed Kash Patel, the FBI director. His right eye is parked in his nose. Clip put up by NOCOG report files. Van Holden exposed $8.7 million Patel Bondi scandal. Patel panicked. Take a listen to this clip. Plays for 20 minutes. What about the millions of dollars that Trump gave probably to both of these in his stock for True Social? Let's listen to this clip.
In just 9 minutes, an $8.7 million conspiracy was about to destroy the careers of America's top law enforcement officials. Pam Bondi didn't expect the classified folder. Kash Patel didn't see the financial records coming. Cameras captured every moment of panic. The Senate chamber erupted in chaos. What did Senator Chris Van Hollen reveal that made the Attorney General and FBI Director collapse on live television? October 7th, 2025, 10:23 a.m. Room S216 of the Hart Senate Office Building. The mahogany-paneled Senate Judiciary Committee chamber buzzed with typical pre-hearing energy. Attorney General Pam Bondi sat confidently at the witness table, her navy suit immaculate, briefing folders neatly arranged. What she didn't know was that FBI Director Kash Patel was about to walk into the biggest financial scandal of his career, and she was going down with him. At exactly 10:23 a.m., Patel entered the chamber through the rear doors like an investigator who had seen too many cover-ups. His FBI badge glinted under the harsh committee lights as he took his seat beside Bondi. The two exchanged a brief, confident glance, a moment that would later be analyzed frame by frame as the last seconds before their world collapsed. Neither suspected that Senator Chris Van Hollen had spent the last 6 weeks building an ironclad financial case that would destroy both their careers. Van Hollen sat like a prosecutor carved from 40 years of government oversight. His wire-rimmed glasses reflected the chamber lights as he shuffled through a thick folder marked Confidential Financial Crimes Unit. Inside were bank records, wire transfer receipts, and FBI surveillance reports that would expose the largest corruption scheme in modern Justice Department history. The Maryland Democrat had prosecuted complex financial crimes before, but nothing quite like this. Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley called the session to order. Today we examine the Department of Justice oversight responsibilities and FBI coordination protocols. The mundane words masked what was about to become the most explosive financial scandal hearing of the decade. Bondi leaned into her microphone, her voice steady but betraying a barely detectable nervous edge. Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Director Patel and I are pleased to discuss our collaborative efforts in law enforcement, but Van Hollen wasn't interested in collaboration talk. He had the receipts. The first 2 minutes proceeded normally. Republican members asked predictable questions about crime statistics and border enforcement. Bondi responded with polished talking points about record prosecutions and unprecedented cooperation. Patel nodded approvingly, occasionally interjecting with FBI success stories. Neither realized they were minutes away from financial annihilation.
I want to know, have you made this mistake with your holster?
Ad popped up. Sorry, folks.
When Van Hollen's turn arrived, Attorney General Bondi, Director Patel, Van Hollen began, his voice carrying the measured authority of decades in oversight hearings. I want to discuss your joint financial arrangements regarding what you've termed interagency cooperation funds. Bondi's shoulders tensed imperceptibly. Patel's pen stopped moving across his notepad. Specifically, I want to examine the Secure Justice Consulting Group. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Senator Van Hollen, Bondi replied carefully. I'm not familiar with the specific entity you're referencing. Perhaps you could clarify the context of your inquiry. She glanced at Patel, expecting support. Instead, she saw something that made her stomach clench. Sweat beginning to form on the FBI director's forehead, despite the air conditioning. Van Hollen opened his folder with deliberate precision. I'm happy to clarify, Attorney General Bondi. This is a corporate filing from the Delaware Secretary of State, dated March 15th. He held up a document with incorporation details clearly visible to the press gallery. Secure Justice Consulting Group, incorporated by, he paused for maximum impact, Director Kash Patel's wife Nisha Patel and your former law partner Rebecca Martinez. Patel's knuckles went white, gripping his water glass. The fascinating part, Van Hollen continued, his voice gaining prosecutorial strength, is that this company received its first payment exactly 12 days after incorporation from the Department of Justice Discretionary Fund. Amount, $8.7 million. The chamber exploded. Camera flashes erupted like lightning strikes. Reporters began frantically typing on their phones, broadcasting the revelation in real time. Bondi's face drained of color as she stared at Patel, who was now visibly sweating through his tailored suit. Senator Van Hollen, Patel stammered, loosening his tie. There are perfectly legitimate explanations for interagency consulting. Oh, I'm sure there are explanations, Director. Van Hollen cut him off with surgical precision, but let me share what our financial investigation discovered. He lifted a stack of bank statements. These are wire transfer records from the Justice Department's discretionary account. $8.7 million transferred in 3 installments between March 27th and April 15th. Complete silence engulfed the chamber. But here's where it gets interesting. Van Hollen continued, now fully in financial prosecutor mode. Within 72 hours of each DOJ payment, Secure Justice Consulting transferred identical amounts minus a 15% processing fee to, he consulted his documents with theatrical precision, Patriot Defense Solutions, a company wholly owned by Director Patel's brother, Vinay, and Southern Legal Strategies, owned by Attorney General Bondi's sister-in-law, Maria Santos. The numbers hit like physical blow. This wasn't just corruption. This was a family money laundering operation using taxpayer funds. Bondi was the first to crack. Senator, you're clearly misunderstanding legitimate consulting arrangements between Justice Department components. Am I misunderstanding this encrypted signal conversation thread? Van Hollen held up printed screenshot Patel to Bondi. The consulting structure is in place. We can begin the transfers tomorrow. Bondi responds at 11:52 p.m. Perfect. The Epstein investigation funds need to be redirected before oversight catches wind. The Epstein connection sent shockwaves through the chamber. Democrats leaned forward in their seats. Republicans looked genuinely stunned. The press gallery erupted in a frenzy of activity. The Epstein investigation, Van Hollen's voice rose with controlled outrage. You two conspired to steal funds allocated for investigating Jeffrey Epstein's network and funnel them to your family members. Patel tried desperately to regain control. Senator, those messages are completely taken out of context. We were discussing legitimate resource allocation. Were you discussing legitimate resource allocation when you cancelled the Epstein investigation 3 days after the first payment? Van Hollen's voice cut through Patel's excuses like a blade. Because according to this FBI internal memo, which you signed, the Jeffrey Epstein network investigation was indefinitely postponed due to budgetary constraints on March 30th. He held up the memo with Patel's signature clearly visible. Budgetary constraint. While you were transferring $8.7 million to your family's consulting company, the implications were staggering. They hadn't just stolen money. They had buried the investigation into one of the most significant sex trafficking cases in American history to cover their tracks. But the financial engineering gets even more sophisticated. Van Hollen continued, producing another set of documents. Because Secure Justice Consulting didn't just receive DOJ funds, they also received $2.3 million from the FBI's counterintelligence operations budget. Director Patel, care to explain why counterintelligence funds were transferred to a company owned by your wife? Patel's face had gone from pale to flushed red. Senator, you're mischaracterizing complex operational funding mechanisms.
Here are the top 5
I told you they're all garbage.
Am I mischaracterizing this audio recording? Van Hollen held up his phone. This is from a private meeting in Attorney General Bondi's office on April 5, 2025. Let me play 40 seconds. The committee chamber filled with crystal clear audio. Bondi's voice was unmistakable. We need to accelerate the transfers before the appropriations review. Cash's counterintelligence budget is clean money, no congressional oversight required. Then Patel's voice, the Epstein investigation is too hot anyway. Better to kill it and use those funds for our operational needs. The recording ended. The silence was deafening. Operational needs? Van Hollen repeated slowly. Is that what you call enriching your families while burying a pedophile investigation? Bondi made one final desperate attempt at deflection. This is clearly a coordinated attack by Democrats who want to undermine Attorney General Bondi. Van Hollen's voice cut through her excuse with devastating calm. I have bank records showing your sister-in-law's company received $1.2 million from this scheme. I have FBI surveillance footage of Director Patel meeting with his brother at the Four Seasons Hotel on the same day payments were authorized. I have testimony from 3 Justice Department accountants who were ordered to expedite and not question these transfers. He leaned forward. What I don't have is any legal justification for what you two have done. The chamber buzzed with frantic activity. CNN had broken into regular programming with a breaking news banner. FBI Director AG implicated in $8.7 billion scandal. Fox News was running a Chiron. Epstein investigation buried for family payoff. Twitter exploded with clips of Patel and Bondi's shocked faces trending worldwide. But Van Hollen wasn't finished destroying them, because this financial conspiracy has an even darker component. He continued, producing a map marked with red pins. The money your families received wasn't just stolen taxpayer funds. It was specifically taken from investigations targeting high-profile sex trafficking networks, child exploitation cases, and organized crime families with political connections. He pointed to specific locations on the map. The Miami trafficking ring investigation, defunded. The Las Vegas escort service with political clients, shut down. The New York modeling agency with underage victims, closed. Each revelation was more damning than the last. Every single one of these cases was terminated within days of payments to your family company. The implications were beyond corruption. This was obstruction of justice on an industrial scale, protecting criminals while enriching themselves. Patel finally snapped, standing abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. He pointed at Van Hollen with a trembling finger. This is a complete fabrication. You're destroying careers based on conspiracy theories and financial innuendo. Sit down, Director, Van Hollen commanded with the authority of someone who had stared down corporate executives and emerged victorious. Because I'm not done with your financial empire yet. Patel remained standing, his chest heaving with rage and panic. Bondi grabbed his arm desperately, trying to pull him back to his seat, but he shook her off violently. The image of the FBI director losing complete control on live television would be replayed millions of times within hours. Your financial empire, I mentioned. Van Hollen continued with deadly calm. Let me introduce the committee to the Secure Justice Consulting Group's real business model. He produced a thick binder. These are service contracts your shell company signed with foreign entities, contracts worth an additional $4.2 million. The foreign money revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. This wasn't just domestic corruption. It was potentially treason. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia paid Secure Justice $1.8 million for litigation consulting services in May 2025. Van Hollen read from the contracts. The same month, Attorney General Bondi dropped the Justice Department's investigation into Saudi financing of extremist groups. He looked up from the documents. United Arab Emirates paid $1.2 million in June for regulatory guidance. The same month, Director Patel terminated the FBI's investigation into UAE money laundering operation. Bondi buried her face in her hands, finally understanding the full scope of their exposure. The image would become the defining photo of the hearing. The Attorney General of the United States, Utterly defeated, caught in a financial conspiracy so massive that denial was impossible. But Van Hollen saved his most devastating revelation for last. "You want to know how we uncovered this entire network?" he asked, his voice now barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "Because someone with a conscience came forward." Special Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, who was ordered by Director Patel to stop asking questions about the secure justice payments. Patel's face went ashy. Sarah Chen had been one of his most trusted financial investigators, someone he thought was completely loyal to the Bureau. The betrayal was as shocking as the exposure itself. "Agent Chen is currently in federal protective custody," Van Hollen continued, "because she received death threats after questioning the legality of the transfers."
Problem is he going to go to prosecute these garbage people, huh?
Death threats that originated from phones registered to, he consulted his Patriot Defense Solutions and Southern Legal Strategies. The committee room erupted again. The idea that FBI whistleblowers were being threatened by the same family network the FBI director had created was beyond any scandal in Justice Department history. Representative Jerry Nadler leaned into his microphone from the gallery. "Mr. Chairman, I move for immediate criminal referral to an independent prosecutor." Second, came voices from both sides of the aisle, including several Republicans who looked genuinely disgusted by the financial revelations. Patel stood frozen, his hands gripping the witness table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Bondi had completely given up any pretense of composure, openly weeping into her hands as the full magnitude of their financial crimes became public record. The two highest law enforcement officials in America were collapsing in real time, destroyed by evidence so overwhelming that denial was mathematically impossible. Van Hollen gathered his financial documents with methodical precision. "Director Patel, Attorney General Bondi, you have both violated your oaths of office, corrupted federal law enforcement, and enriched your families using funds meant to protect children from predators and trafficking victims from exploitation. You've turned the Justice Department into a personal ATM while burying investigations that could have saved lives." He stood slowly, his 70-year-old frame carrying the weight of American justice. "But perhaps most shamefully, you've betrayed every law enforcement officer who risks their lives for justice while you were planning your next family payday." The hearing room had become a hurricane of noise and activity. Reporters shouted questions, camera crews fought for position, and committee members demanded immediate action. Through it all, Patel stood motionless like a statue while Bondi continued sobbing uncontrollably. In the hours that followed, the financial earthquake devastated Washington and beyond. CNN led with a special report titled, "FBI Director, Attorney General Implicated in Massive Family Enrichment Scheme." Even Fox News, despite usual Trump administration support, opened with "Explosive Financial Evidence Rocks Justice Department." The hashtag Jen Patel Bondi money launder became the top trending topic globally within 47 seconds. By evening, calls for immediate resignations came from both parties. Senator Susan Collins called the financial evidence deeply troubling and clearly criminal. Senator Josh Hawley, despite his loyalty to Trump allies, described the scheme as indefensible theft from crime victims. The White House press secretary faced a barrage of questions about whether President Trump had knowledge of the family enrichment network. Legal experts universally agreed that criminal charges were inevitable. Former federal prosecutor Ken White explained on CNN, "What Senator Van Hollen presented isn't just corruption evidence. It's evidence of a criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruct justice, and potentially commit treason through foreign payment." The human cost became clear as victim advocacy groups revealed that dozens of trafficking investigations had been terminated while Patel and Bondi enriched their families. The psychological impact on survivors who thought they'd finally have justice was devastating. As night fell on Washington, both officials faced the complete collapse of everything they had built. Their careers, their reputations, their freedom, and their families' futures hung by threads that Van Hollen had systematically severed over 9 minutes of devastating financial testimony. The Maryland senator, meanwhile, returned to his office and continued his 40-year mission of holding powerful officials accountable. At 70, he had just delivered one of the most consequential financial fraud exposures in congressional history, armed with nothing but evidence, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to following the money trail. The story was far from over. Criminal investigations would multiply, trials would come. But in one extraordinary day, a methodical senator from Maryland had proven that in America, no one, not even the Attorney General and FBI Director, could steal from crime victims and expect to escape justice. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or subpoena, it's financial records traced and revealed at exactly the right moment. What happens when leaders who built power on family enrichment are undone by bank statements? If law enforcement can't survive financial transparency, was it ever really about justice? The answers echoed through the marble halls of Congress long after the cameras stopped rolling and the money trail led to prison. This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and incidents are fictionalized for commentary and educational purposes. This is not intended to defame, but to explore themes of financial accountability and justice in American democracy.
You think Kash Patel's 26-year-old girlfriend is going to stick by him now? Huh? Does she feel stupid laying down with that garbage or what, huh? I'll attach the link. It's amazing, huh? They went from the top crime fighters to the top criminal, corrupt prisoners. That's where they're headed. I'll attach the link. Pass it along. And thanks for listening.